Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.
Republican Representative Jim Steineke of R-Kaukauna, is seeking re-election in the 5th Assembly District. Mr. Majority Leader, welcome back to WisconsinEye.
Thanks a lot. Good to be here.
Kimberly Clark has given the Senate,
Right.
I'll get that right, until September 30th to act on the package that the Assembly passed on February 22nd. Not going to happen. Steps after September 30th. Should Kimberly Clark wait until after the election to make a decision on the Fox Crossing plan? And the reason I ask you as chief sponsor of the bill that passed February 22nd.
Yeah, I would hope so. I'm not sure where September 30th came as a deadline. I'm sure that they want an answer sooner rather than later. But given the political atmosphere right now, the bills that are generally bipartisan in nature aren't right now, because it doesn't seem like the other side wants to give Governor Walker any wins, so they're not willing to vote for things like this. So I think if it went out past the election, I think there's a much greater chance that it would pass with bipartisan support.
Are you afraid that every other company is going to ask for similar benefits given Foxconn and that Kimberly Clark wants? What about this snowball question?
Yeah, I know. Some people think there's a slippery slope out there. I think these are two pretty unique situations. I mean, Foxconn obviously brought in, is pledging to bring in up to 13,000 jobs in a completely new industry for the state. That was a very unique situation. In this, you're talking hundreds upon hundreds of jobs in the Fox Valley with a company that's been here for over 100 years, that has a really solid history. And not to mention that, there's tons of suppliers throughout Northeast Wisconsin and throughout the rest of the state that rely on Kimberly Clark. So I think this is another unique situation. I don't think that there's many, many situations like this throughout the state.
Why are 3 or 4 Republican senators against your Kimberly Clark bill?
Well, it's a good question. I don't like to get into people's heads. I know there's some people that philosophically oppose incentives like this. These guys don't seem to line up that way because they voted for the Foxconn incentives. But they might be worried more about the slippery slope. But that's really up to us as legislators to make sure that that's not there. Okay.
The impasse on transportation highway funding. How can you, as an assembly leader, if you're reelected, break that impasse? Yeah, where do we go from here?
It's a good question. I think we're getting to a point where there's more and more consensus that we're doing as much as we can to save money on the front end, right? We're streamlining the Department of Transportation. We're finding efficiencies. We're working on some of the rules that increase costs. So we've done a lot of that stuff on the front end. Now when we get to it, you're really down to revenue, and if you have enough revenue to continue to fund the needs that we have out there. And I think as we go forward, that's the case we have to make, is that we've done about as much as we can to save money on the front end. Now it's time to look at broadening that base of revenue, because the gas tax just isn't keeping up with our needs.
Well, does that mean you don't support raising the gas tax to move the issue forward?
Well, I think the gas tax is probably in the short term, it's the most efficient way to collect revenue. Long term, it's probably not the thing that makes the most sense, because as we all know, there's more and more hybrids on the road, more and more electric cars on the road as time goes on. So it's not going to really broaden the base of revenue for transportation. So we have to be more creative than that.
When the word T, tolling, comes up in the Capitol, your position?
Yeah, no, I think it's something we definitely have to look at. I mean, as you look nationally, I think that's where more and more states are going, because they recognize if you're going to collect revenue, it's the most fair thing to do is collect it from the people that are actually utilizing it. If the gas tax isn't an answer going forward long into the future, that tolling is really the only other way that we can make sure that people from outside of the state are paying into the cost of our roads as well. So I think that's something we have to look at. But people have a misconception about what tolling looks like. It wouldn't be on every highway in the state. It'd be on certain corridors. And it's also not like the old style in Illinois where you'd have people at the toll booths that would be open road tolling.
The current budget that you shepherded through the Assembly does include a significant increase in K-12 state aid.
Yeah.
When local school administrators tell you, hey, that was good, but we need another similar big bump in the next budget, how do you answer?
Yeah, I mean, my wife is a public school teacher, so, and my kids go to public schools. I have 3 kids in public schools, so it's something that I care deeply about. And I do think that increases are warranted as long as the economy keeps up and the revenue is there. I mean, one of the things that we've been doing over the course of the last 8 years is matching increases with where the economy is, because if we just arbitrarily pick a number like Tony Evers did with the 1.4 billion, he has no idea what the revenues are going to be next year. That's an exorbitant amount that's going to lead to tax increases if that happens. There's just no two ways about it. So what I prefer to do is match those increases with our ability to pay for them. And that's what I think we would do going into the future here.
You've watched Vouchers Choice grow, Milwaukee, Racine, now statewide. Should it expand further?
I think I'm pretty comfortable with where it's at now. I mean, I think we have to be careful with this expansion because we want to make sure that it doesn't have a negative impact on our public schools. I think right now it's growing at an acceptable rate. So I'd prefer to keep our current system in place and then see where we go in the future.
Local governments have been living with levy limits for 14 years. Some local government officials say it hurts their ability to provide local services. Keep levy limits to control property taxes, loosen them, get rid of them?
I think a combination. I think we have to have some levy limits in place. I think there are some communities that are struggling. I have a community in my district, the village of Nichols, very small village that's really struggling because they have no growth. And so their ability to raise the levy is, I mean, it amounts to a few $100s a year, I think they said. So when they have infrastructure to pay for, it's really difficult. They end up borrowing all the time for their infrastructure needs. So those are the kind of situations that, much like the schools, where with declining enrollment, municipalities with little to no growth, I think we have to look at ways to help them out.
A big issue in the next budget will be whether we build a new prison. Green Bay and Waupun built in the 1800s. Some Democratic candidates for governor said we could eventually cut the prison population by half. Do we need a new prison?
I think at this point we probably do. I'll rely on some of my colleagues who know more about this. David Steffen is one that's been a leader on this, so is Senator Coles. The prison, there's no doubt that the prison is old and it's outdated and it needs, if we didn't replace it, it would need significant amount of renovation. So given the fact that this prison population, wherever we go with it, isn't going to disappear overnight, we're going to have to find a way to house them in a way that's safe, not only for the inmates, but for the staff as well. So I think that's something that we'll have to look at.
UW system budget, should we continue the freeze on resident undergrad tuition for a 7th and 8th year?
I don't know. I think we'll have to take a look at that in the context of the next budget and see what we're able to do as far as funding goes. If we can't increase the funding for UW that would pay for that freeze, then I'd be more concerned about it. But if the revenue is there, if the economy keeps humming the way it is, and we can add more money into the UW system to help pay for the cost of that freeze, then I'd be open to it.
Legalize recreational and medical marijuana?
Not recreational. I'm more open to looking at medicinal marijuana. The real difficulty there is trying to figure out a structure and regulations by which it doesn't become de facto recreational use of marijuana. Because what we saw out in California, at least reports that I heard, was when it was medicinal marijuana, just about everybody was getting a prescription for marijuana. So we would have to have some tight regulations on it. But we already voted to legalize CBD oil, which is a derivative. So we've already indicated the willingness to look at things like this. We just have to figure out what makes sense so it doesn't become recreational use.
The $100 million in school safety grants, are your local schools telling you that will make their schools safer? And why do you say we don't need to change gun laws?
Well, okay. Well, there's absolutely no doubt that the $100 million is going to make the schools safer. I've talked to every one of my school districts, and they're really excited about the the ability to fortify and secure their schools. And again, as the husband of a school teacher and the dad of 3 kids in public schools, I'm excited because it gives me that much more peace of mind as they go to school that they're going to be safe every day. As far as gun laws go, I just haven't seen a law that a criminal isn't willing to break if they want to go into a school and shoot up the place. I mean, that's a disturbing thing. What we need to focus more on is resources for mental health care. That's something that we have been doing over the course of the last 8 years. I sponsored a bill that set up a new access line for primary care physicians to contact for younger kids, if their younger kids are presenting, younger patients are presenting with issues. Things like that, that's where our investments have to go. But when it comes down to it, these people don't respect the laws that are on the books now, so I'm not sure what adding another law in would do. Which
Which gets us into healthcare. How can we preserve and maybe expand healthcare in the rural areas of Wisconsin?
Yeah, I mean that's really that's a difficult problem. Just like anything else, whether it's rural broadband or schools or healthcare, these issues out in the rural areas are really concerning because if you can't have access to good broadband, good schools, good healthcare, people aren't going to live there and the jobs aren't going to be there. So whether we look at incentives to try to get our medical professionals to live in a certain area for a while, to help offset the cost of their schooling, something like that. I think it's going to take a pretty broad-based approach.
Well, follow up on that. Is it the role of state government to retain and recruit doctors, nurses, and other medical professionals in some of these areas?
Well, I think it's the role of state government to make sure we have vibrant, do everything we can to create an environment where communities are vibrant and thriving and secure and safe. And I think healthcare goes a long way towards helping that situation.
The partnership between state government and Delta Dental that subsidizes dental clinics in some low-income areas, should that remain a priority in the next MA budget?
I think so. I would have to. I'm always one that likes to look at results and kind of the metrics. So that's something I haven't dug into real deeply over the course of the last year or 2 years. So it's something I would take a look at. But if it's working, yeah.
The issue of caregivers, AARP says 578,000 Wisconsin residents provide care for a family member or a neighbor, someone they love. Would you support laws or regulations that call for hospitals to recognize family caregivers when their loved ones are hospitalized? Have you studied that issue?
I haven't, but it's one that's really close to my heart. My dad is currently the caregiver for my mom. She has Alzheimer's, and they live in an independent housing on an assisted living campus. And I see firsthand every day how tough it is for him and the stress that it puts on him as an 86-year-old guy dealing with a spouse that has Alzheimer's. So any resources that we can give to them to help them as they help their spouses or their family members, I think is important, because at the end of the day, it saves us all money if family is able to care for these people instead of putting them in long-term housing or long-term care.
Differences between you and your opponent on November 6th?
I quite honestly don't know my opponent. I haven't met him, haven't talked to him or seen him out there. So I don't want to get into, I'm better than him on anything. I think people just can look at my record and judge for themselves. I mean, I've been active on children's issues, really proud of the homelessness package that we put together in this last budget to try to help curtail homelessness in Wisconsin. And just doing everything that we can to make this state better for our kids as they grow up than it was for us as we did. I mean, selfishly, I want my kids to want to stay here in Wisconsin. I want them to be able to find a job, to find affordable housing, and to have grandkids or have babies here so our grandkids will be close. So that's what I'm focused on.
Republican Representative Jim Steineke of Kaukauna is seeking re-election in the 5th Assembly District. Jim, thanks for talking to WisconsinEye.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.